Not politics, but people. Not shocked, but grieved. Not them, but us. Not reactive, but redemptive. For God so loved the world that he gave the world a Savior.
Well, it was about 15 years ago. First time I had ever tried this out. I got onto an internet message board, and I know today it seems, actually they're old-fashioned now, but 15 years ago they were kind of a big deal. And I got on this internet message board, and it was a fan site for Arizona State University football. And I loved it because I could get on there, and at the time, again, you know, this was a long time ago, once or twice a day I'd get on there and just see, did anything happen? Was anybody talking about the team? Was there something I needed to know? And what was getting ready to happen for the season? All that kind of stuff. And so I loved checking this out because it felt like a great place to talk about something I really cared about. Well, it didn't take very long, maybe a week or two into this, that I pulled it open one day, and at the very top of the page, some guy who apparently was a fan of the school that shall not be named south of us, they had posted something very negative about the team, about the quarterback, used some inappropriate language, just kind of attacked the fans, and I felt like, this can't stand. This is unacceptable. And I busily started typing my reply. And as I'm typing away, I realized after a while, I had gone for a whole page already. And I finished it up, and I hit send, and I thought, I'm going to get this guy. I mean, he's going to read this. He's probably going to come away in tears. He's going to be apologizing how wrong he was and how dumb he was. And I'm just going to win the day by making this post. And I waited. Nothing happened. And I waited some more, another day or two. Nothing happened. I thought, well, this is odd. Maybe he's just in this shame tunnel that he can't get out of, you know. So I would put again, this is old school internet, bump and hit enter. And that would push the thread back to the top of the page thinking, well, maybe he missed it. Maybe he didn't see it. And I kept doing this over the course of several days, kept bumping it up to the top, and no answer, no reply, no nothing. And finally, one of the board admins sent me a message, and he said, it's just very simple. It said, don't feed the trolls, which was internet speak for there's some people out there that just want to pick a fight, and they don't really want to have a conversation. They just love getting under other people's skins. And it kind of reminded me of something my grandmother used to say, and I don't know where she got it from. She grew up in Oklahoma on a farm, so maybe it came from there. But she said, don't wrestle with a pig because you both get dirty and the pig likes it. And that was her way of saying, look, there are times, there are places, and there you go. There are times and places where people really don't want to have a conversation. They want to have an argument. Or worse, they just want to see if they can fire you up. If you don't like the pig in the mud from Oklahoma, then maybe you remember Alfred the butler talking to Batman when he told him, why would somebody do the things that were being done? And he said, sometimes, sir, people just like to watch the world burn. And there are people like that out there. And I wish it wasn't true. I wish that wasn't the case, but it is. And whether that's the reason or maybe there's other reasons, I don't know. But it seems like we live in an age of offense, that everybody is busy finding ways to be offended by things. That they're upset or they're bothered or this can't stand or this is a wrong that's got to be righted or whatever it is. And I think it's because we're so extreme and we're so at each other sometimes. And we live in this almost offense kind of mentality of I got to make sure I don't offend anyone and I've got to make sure nobody offends me, right? It's a tough place to be. I remember years ago, one of my spiritual mentors, and he was a really wise guy. And he said, one of the marks of spiritual maturity is to be unoffendable. And I thought, oh, that doesn't sound right. You know, I don't, first of all, I'm not even sure that's a word. It doesn't sound right. But he challenged me and he tested me. He said, listen, now here's what I want you to do. I want you to go back and read through the story of Jesus. And for those of you that know, obviously the New Testament, those of you who don't know, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the first 4 books in the New Testament are written accounts of Jesus' life and all the interactions he had with people. He said, I want you to go back and read the story of Jesus again, and I want you to find me every time that Jesus was offended. So, okay, so I go back and I start looking, and I'm sure I'm going to find it, right? I'm looking. I mean, of course, so many exchanges with Jesus were negative by people that were mad or whatever else. Certainly, Jesus was offended somewhere, and I'm reading. I can't find it. I can find where people called Jesus names. I can find where people misappropriated his motives and questioned why he was doing what he was doing. I can find places where people lied about him. I can find places where they tried to ruin his reputation by talking about the people he hung around with. And I could find places where they would twist his words and really try to convince people that, well, he meant something else, even though that's what he said. And over and over and over, I find all this, but I can't ever find Jesus getting offended. I mean, he just, it's almost like he couldn't be offended. Jesus always responded to, no matter how people acted towards him, he always responded with this old word called civility. And sometimes you might think of being civil, or is that just having good manners, or what is that? Well, civility, very simply, is to speak and act with courtesy and respect. That's what it is, to speak and to act towards other people with courtesy and respect. And Jesus showed this civility even when people intentionally tried to offend him. Now, if you go again and read the story of Jesus, you will definitely find places where Jesus is calling things right and wrong. He had no problem doing that. He loved people. He insisted on justice. He was a friend to the hurting, and he also called sin, sin. So don't misunderstand me. It's not about just being a nice person, but Jesus saw everybody as someone made in the image of God and therefore valuable. And so even if they treated him with offense, he would not be offended. It's kind of astonishing, actually. I mean, if you really go back and do the work and read the stories, the things they called him, the things they said about him, the way they treated him, I mean, anybody would read that and say, well, he has a right to be offended. But he chose to never be offended and to always respond with civility. Which, just like I said, is just amazing to me. It's astonishing. But if you're a follower of Jesus, did you know that the same Spirit that lived in Jesus, that allowed him to respond with civility, that even raised him from the dead, it's that much power, that same Spirit lives in you, that you too can actually live an astonishing life just like he did, because that same Spirit lives in you. About 2 weeks ago, we started this series called Woke, and we talked about the idea that there is a sin called racism, that there are definitely races, but that God created all races. God created one race, really, and we just have different faces. And as we talked about that, we realized that one of the best things we could do, and one of the things I said from the very beginning when the George Floyd incident ripped through headlines, one of the first things I said was, we need to be peacemakers. Peacemakers. And it comes right out of Matthew 5:9, which is Jesus' words. He said, blessed are the peacemakers, for they'll be called the children of God. So Jesus was in favor of this, but I actually got a little bit of pushback. And to be honest, I kind of agreed with the pushback I got. The pushback was, is that enough? You know, that sounds really, really passive. Like you're just kind of saying, okay, well, if somebody gets crossways with you, you should try to figure out a way to be at peace with them, and then that will be good. That's all you need to do. And it's a very passive understanding of what it means to be a peacemaker. And as I thought about that, I thought, well, everything I've ever tried out that Jesus has said has always worked. But I kind of agreed. Maybe that's too passive. What does this mean? And so I had to go back. I had to go back and look again. What does it mean to be a peacemaker? And I did a little bit of research, and here's what I found. When Jesus said we should be peacemakers, he based that on a concept. If you've ever been around anybody that's Jewish or from the Hebrew culture or anything like that, he based that on a concept called shalom. Now, shalom is what we translate as peace, but it's a much, much bigger idea than what we mean when we say peace. Just a very simple sketch of this. Shalom is the idea not only that there should be peace among people, but that I bring peace with me if I have shalom. And in other words, it's not enough to just be a passive, let's make peace if there's a problem. It's actually an active thing that I am injecting peace into every situation I find myself. And so you could actually say it this way, that instead of just being a peacemaker, and that's not a bad translation, but another way to think about it is, be a peace bringer. That it's my job as a follower of Jesus to bring peace everywhere I go into every situation I encounter. And so a way to think about that is a peace bringer is somebody that confronts problems and finds solutions, but pay attention to the last part of that sentence, because it's not hard to find somebody that confronts problems and finds solutions. Good managers do that. Your friends can do that. You do that in relationships that glorify God. That glorify God. See, so that's so important as you think about this idea of being a peacemaker and a peace bringer. And what civility does civility that Jesus showed, this unoffendableness, is actually how you go about being a peace bringer. And I know that's a lot of ideas floating around. And so one other suggestion, and I think if you've got a Bible or you like to follow along in the app, Ephesians chapter 4 is going to give us a great example of what this looks like. It's about 2,000 years ago. Paul had started a church in this city called Ephesus, and he did what he always did. He would go there, he would get the church started, he'd get them up and running, and then he'd go to another place to start another church. And he had done that, and he had left this little group of Jesus followers in this city called Ephesus, and he knew they were in a tough spot. There were not a large number of them, and they were in a culture and in a city that didn't really want them there, right? That at best thought they were a little bit weird, and at worst thought that they were actually the problem. Like whatever problems we're having, it's because of them. So it sounds familiar a little bit to me. But not only had all this happened, the culture had begun to turn a little bit hostile. And so Paul is writing to these followers, this small group, and he's telling them, look, here is how you can stay connected to each other and represent Jesus well in a broken and hostile culture. Here's what it looks like. And so he writes to them, and it's in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29. We'll put it up and kind of read this together. This is the heart of civility. He says, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, with whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Get rid of all bitterness, rage and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. I don't know about you, whether it's online or in an email or in a conversation or overhearing something when you're out in public. It's so easy to get worked up, isn't it? It seems like as a culture, the way we have learned to communicate with each other is to either say nothing or insist on everything. You know, I'm just going to stay shallow and not say a word and not engage and not talk about anything but the weather or sports. But if we talk about anything slightly controversial, anything emotional, anything where you may disagree with me, it goes from 0 to 100 like that. It gets so intense. And here's what I've noticed when it gets intense. It's easy for us to get snarky, followers of Jesus or not. It's easy for us to post something in anger. It's easy for us to send off that email and really show them who's boss. It's so easy to fall into that. And I think what it's really come down to is if somebody disagrees with us, we feel threatened. If somebody's not seeing the world the way we see it, if somebody even offers to correct us, so often instead of having a conversation, what we want to do is stick them back somehow, right? I mean, whether it's with cynicism or sarcasm or bury them in data, we're just going to get them and jab them and make sure they either give up or start to agree with us. I know I'm guilty of it. I've tried to get my zingers in here and there to prove my point. Leave on a high note. You know, I made the point, now I'm going to run away before anybody can say anything else. And Paul says that's not civility. As a matter of fact, he says you don't have a right, even if you're angry, you don't have a right to be rude. And he says because what that leads to is the brawling and the bitterness and the rage and the anger and the malice and the slander and all the things he said we're supposed to get rid of. But it puts us right in that mode where that's how we're talking and that's how we're interacting with people. And the worst part of all of this, because so far, you could say, well, preacher, you're kind of just telling me to have good manners, right? You know, you're just saying, be a nice guy, say nice things, avoid difficult conversations. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. Because Paul ties this to something very, very important. Don't miss this. He said, when we respond out of bitterness and rage and anger and slander and brawling and malice and all of those things, we grieve the Spirit of God. The Spirit of God who lives in us is grieved. I mean, this is way beyond manners, okay? He's grieved. And what's maybe even doubly bad about this is if we are followers of Jesus and we get into discussion on Facebook or we get into a conversation with somebody or we send that email and we're trying to represent God and we're trying to hold up God and we're trying to ask people to see the world through God's eyes and we're doing it in a way that actually grieves God because of the way we've chosen to handle it. You see, civility is not about manners at all. And Paul says we can do so much better. because that same Spirit that lives in Jesus lives in you, and you can do so much better. You can actually actively use your words to build people up, to benefit the people that are listening, to heal and to help. You can use your words in a very powerful way. And not only is that a good thing and being a nice person and all that other stuff, I don't think it's too far to say that brings joy to the Spirit that lives inside us. So see, civility is a big deal. This is not a small thing. This is a big, big deal. And as the church, we've talked about this all throughout this racism series and even the series before. We talked about this idea that you and I are the church. It's not an institution. It's not a building. It's not any of that stuff. It's you and me living life in the world. And Jesus is the hope of the world. And the way that he transmits that hope most of the time is through his church. It's you and me. And like I said, now all of a sudden civility takes on this huge, huge weight. This isn't a small thing. This isn't a choice of just being pleasant to somebody else. There's a whole lot more at stake here. As a matter of fact, Proverbs chapter 18 says that our words have the power of life and death. I mean, there is no more grave stakes than that. Our words have the power of life and death. And so if I'm going to be a follower of Jesus, then it really matters what I say and how I say it. As a matter of fact, the words of a follower of Jesus need to be filtered words. We need to filter our words so that we're not just responding out of how we feel in the moment or if we feel threatened. Because again, I go back to Jesus' example. There had to be moments when people were maligning him, when they were calling him names, when they were accusing him of things he didn't do. There had to be those flashes where he felt like, you know what? I need to tell them what's what. But he didn't, because he never made it about himself. He always chose civility. He always saw them as people made in the image of God, even if they were trying to offend him in the moment. So we've got to have a couple of filters. And I think they're simple filters that I want to suggest to you. I grabbed them all from the book of Proverbs and the book of Psalms, and there's probably more, and you might know some better ones, but there's at least 4 that I think could be really, really helpful to us, okay? So the first filter we need to think about, if we're going to say something, if we're going to post something, if we're going to send an email, if we're going to have a conversation, the very first question, is what I'm going to say true? Is it true? I mean, do I know for a fact that what I'm presenting as true is really true? Now, that doesn't mean we can't have questions and discussions and learn things. Of course we can. We need to. What we have to avoid is presenting something as true if we don't know that it's true. Is it gossip? Is it a rumor? Is it a conspiracy theory? I mean, what is it? There's so much stuff floating around out there. I mean, you know this. You've heard the term fake news, and there's people that love to Photoshop and make up stories and get people off on wild goose chases. Do I know it's true? Because if it's not true, I don't want to present it as though it is, because, and catch this, and I know this feels heavy, if I present something that's true and I don't know that it is, I'm deceiving. I'm lying. I'm telling you this is true, but I don't really know that it is. We have to be so careful with that. And I think it's fairly obvious. And again, Proverbs talks about this over and over and over. We don't want to be deceptive. We want to speak the truth. That's our first filter. Is what I'm going to say true? Second filter, same thing. Is what I'm going to say helpful? Just what Paul said. Does it build people up? Does it benefit the people that listen? I mean, is it going to be the kinds of things that are going to bring joy to the Spirit of God who lives in me? Then that's helpful. I think another way to think about it is, why am I saying this? Whatever it is I'm saying, whatever conversation I'm having, again, whether it's online and digital or in person, why am I saying it? Am I saying it out of a genuine desire to help? Or am I trying to stick somebody? Am I trying to make a point? Make somebody else feel small or foolish? Why am I saying this? And I know there's 2 more to come, and I know we're just about halfway through, but this does not mean we can't have uncomfortable conversations. Of course we can. This doesn't mean that we'll never have a confrontation. Of course we will. We're people. These things happen. This is how we filter what we say in those uncomfortable conversations and in those difficult moments, all right? So is it true? Is it helpful? And again, it's a simple question. Why am I saying it? Third one, is what I'm going to say personalized? And I know that one sounds a little funky. What do you mean personalized? Basically, this is the idea. Is what I'm going to say, am I saying it to the right person or right people? Because sometimes we shout out to the world and we really only need to talk to one person. And other times we just talk to one person, but we really needed to talk to some other people because we're talking about things that involve them and we're not including them. And so is the audience right? Am I talking to the right people? And just as importantly, am I doing it in the right way? You know this, and I don't remind you of this because I don't think you do, but I fall into this too. Sometimes it's for efficiency's sake. Sometimes it's because it's just quicker, easier, more comfortable for me. But there are conversations you shouldn't have over text, right? I mean, there are many that you can have. Are you going to be there? Yes. What time? 9 o'clock. I mean, sharing information. Hey, I really appreciate you. Those kind of things. Absolutely. But there are some conversations that you shouldn't have over text. There's also conversations you shouldn't have on social media because it's just not the right place. It's not the right forum. It's too easy to be misunderstood. It's too easy for your words to create problems instead of help people. And so you've got to right size this thing. Am I talking to the right person? And am I talking to them the right way? Does it make sense? I know I have found personally that the more emotional the conversation, the more potentially conflict in the conversation, and really even beyond all those other things, the more important the conversation, the more I've got to lean towards being in person, being with that person. Because you know this, there's so much communication that happens non-verbally, and it's so easy. I've done it, I don't know how many times, to misread an email and realize that's not what they meant. That's what I took it as, but that's not what they meant. And so is what I'm going to say personalized? And then the last filter, which covers them all, and it covers a multitude of sins, it wraps all our virtues, is what I'm going to say loving. So is it true? Is it helpful? Is it personalized? Is what I'm going to say loving? And this really speaks to how I say it. Again, like I said, there's going to be moments where we have those hard conversations. There's going to be moments where we have to talk about something that's uncomfortable, that's controversial, that maybe there's not agreement on. And you know what? That's okay. How am I going to do that? Can I have the conversation? Can I say the words? Can I filter my words through a filter of, does this look like grace? Does this look like humility? If so, I'm on the right track. But if I back up and say, no, these words look more like accusation and judgment and insult, well, then I'm on the wrong track, and that filter needs to kick in. And I know that feels hard. Like, how do you do this? How do you filter all your words and all your conversations? I don't think you got to run through the grid every single time before you speak. I do think we need to realize that our words matter, and it's important that we filter them. Not so that we have good manners, but so that we represent Jesus well, so that we bring joy to the Spirit and not grief to the Spirit. I saw a great example of this the other day. It was a newscast in Oklahoma, and I'm going to show you a video in just a moment of what happened after this that I described to you. But there were two anchors, Alex and Jason. Alex was a white female, and Jason was a black male anchor, and they were doing a story. And they had done one of these kind of publicity pieces where they put a camera at the zoo in some of the animal enclosures, and they showed all the footage of the animals playing and doing whatever they do and all this stuff. And they kind of finished up. They put it in the gorilla enclosure, and they watched some of the gorilla stuff, and then a baby gorilla found the camera. And so he came over, and he's playing with it, and he's pawing at it and sticking out his tongue and licking it and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And then they cut away, and Alex said to Jason, that baby gorilla looks a little bit like you. And if you don't know this, I mean, unfortunately, there's a horrible history of people talking about black people as monkeys and apes or chimps or anything derogatory that way. And it goes back to what we've talked about, to say that they're somehow less than, to say that they're not as important. And I don't know if Alex was aware of this or not. I think she was. I don't think she meant it mean-spirited, but she said it. And you can imagine the awkwardness on the set and on the newscast. They kind of quickly wrapped it up and went to commercial, and the producers tried to cover it up and get everything fixed as best they could. And then the next, that day and the next morning, there was all kinds of social media and protests, and she needs to be fired and this and that, and I can't believe this. And then other people making fun of it and kind of joining in and piling in with racist stuff. And it was this horrible, horrible situation, all because of this comment that was made. But they gave us a great example of civility and what civility looks like. And so I want you to watch how these two, Alex and Jason, addressed this the next day on air. Let's watch this together.
Message from KFCO's Alex Houston and Jason Hackett.
I'm here
morning because I want to apologize not only to my coworker, Jason, but to our entire community. I said something yesterday that was inconsiderate, it was inappropriate, and I hurt people. And I want you to know, I understand how much I hurt you out there and how much I hurt you. I love you so much, and you have been one of my best friends for the past year and a half, and I would never do anything on purpose to hurt you. And I love our community, and I want you all to know, from the bottom of my heart, I apologize for what I said. I know it was wrong, and I am so sorry.
Oh, Alex, thank you very much, and I do accept your apology, and I do appreciate your apology. I want to let everybody out there know that Alex is one of my best friends. I mean, we do what we do here, and you know, it's not as if we see each other here and then we leave and we go home. We talk every day, or almost every other day. I've told you things. I've shared things with you as a friend, and I do appreciate you, and I do love you. All that being said, and Alex will be the first to admit this to you, what she said yesterday was wrong. It cut deep for me, and it cut deep for a lot of you in the community. I've heard the phone calls, and I've heard the Facebook messages as well. And I guess coming out of this, I want this to be a teachable moment. And that lesson here is that words matter. There's no doubt about that. Changing demographics here in this country, the demographics are changing. We're becoming a more diverse country, and there's no excuse. We have to understand the stereotypes. We have to understand each other's backgrounds and the words that hurt, the words that cut deep. And we have to find a way to replace those words with love and words of affirmation as well. You know, what we do here as broadcasters, we use words. Words are the tools of our trade. Much like a plumber would use a wrench or a doctor would use a scalpel, we use words. And our goal and what we need to do is use those words not to hurt and not to divide, but to build a more perfect union. And this is going to be a journey for us. We're learning things here. And we at KOCO5 hope that you join us along on this journey. Thank you guys very much.
I don't know what Jason's background is, if he's a believer or not, but he modeled civility so well. And he didn't let her off the hook. He was honest that it hurt. He was honest that there was work to do. But he didn't take offense, and he didn't make it about him. He talked about how things could move forward from here. And I just thought, what an incredible example to see it played out. And here's what I know. The world around you is looking for this, desperately looking for people that know how to hear hard things, to even endure offensive things and respond with grace, to show them what it looks like to live in unity, to show them what forgiveness looks like. I'm not talking about being a doormat. Nobody ever accused Jesus of being a doormat. I am talking about responding in such a way that you're a peace bringer, that you respond with civility, and that you model the life that we're supposed to live, because Jesus can speak to the deepest need that anyone has. And through his church, he models what unity and love looks like, and inclusion and belonging. But you might say, but it's so bad out there. It's so ugly out there. I mean, if you get on social media, or you're in the wrong office place, or you're connected to people that have nothing to do with God and want nothing to do with God, you think, oh, it's just, man, it's just so much easier to retreat and pull back and not engage that stuff. I just don't want to be around it. I don't like it. It may be too bad. We just need to wait, right, until God does something. You know why it's so bad? Because they need Jesus that much. That's why it's so bad. And like I said, we have this incredible opportunity, and racism happens to be the topic that has drove most of these conversations the last couple of days. But you know what? You could substitute it with any sin. We are separated from God. And the reason it is bad is because the separation is deep. And he's called us, you and me, to love and follow Jesus and to invite other people to do the same. That is the rescue plan. It's the only rescue plan. It matters how we do it. We do it with civility. We filter our words. We live our lives as peace bringers. And I want to invite you to join me in that. If you've had a hard time with it, now's the time to get on the right track. If you don't know what it is like to follow Jesus, now's the time to step into that. So I want to invite you to pray with me, and then we're going to kind of conclude our services with a few more words at the end. But let's pray together right now.